My wife Sarah and I thought we had found the perfect slice of suburban paradise when we purchased our home 3 years ago. The neighborhood had everything we wanted: beautiful trees lining the streets, friendly neighbors who waved as you drove by, and most importantly, enough space between houses that you did not feel like you were living on top of one another. Our colonial-style house sat at the edge of the development, backing up to a small wooded area that provided the privacy we cherished. It was not palatial by any means, but it was perfect for us, especially with the modifications we had installed for Sarah's mobility needs. You see, my wife is not just any ordinary person. Before her injury, Sarah was, and still is, a dedicated K-9 unit police officer. 5 years ago, while pursuing a suspect on foot, she suffered a serious fall that resulted in permanent damage to her spine. The doctors told her she would never walk normally again, but Sarah has always been the type to defy expectations. Through sheer determination and grueling physical therapy, she managed to recover enough to return to active duty, though in a modified capacity. These days, she works primarily in training and deployment with her partner, Max, a Belgian Malinois with intelligence that sometimes seems almost human. I work from home as a software developer, which allows me to help Sarah when needed, though she rarely asks for assistance. Our routine was comfortable. I would work in my home office while Sarah would either be at the training facility or out on special assignments with Max. Her specially equipped police vehicle was modified to accommodate both her disability and Max's transport requirements. The department had been incredibly supportive, making all necessary accommodations to keep one of their best K-9 handlers on the force. Life was good, peaceful even. Our neighbors respected Sarah for her service, often stopping by to chat or offer help when they saw her having a difficult day with her mobility. Max had become something of a neighborhood celebrity, with local children always asking permission to pet him when Sarah walked him around the block during her exercise routines. Everything changed about 6 months ago when the Sunshine Meadows Homeowners Association elected a new board. Our property technically sat just outside their jurisdiction, a fact confirmed by our closing documents and the county property maps. We had specifically chosen this location to avoid HOA restrictions, as we valued our independence and the freedom to modify our home as needed for Sarah's condition. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a notice taped to our mailbox. It was printed on bright yellow paper with bold lettering, "Notice of Noncompliance." According to this document, our home was in violation of several HOA codes, including unapproved exterior modifications, the wheelchair ramp at our side entrance, and commercial vehicle parking, Sarah's K-9 unit SUV. The notice demanded immediate correction of these violations and payment of a $150 fine. Sarah and I looked at each other in confusion when I brought the notice inside. "This has to be a mistake," she said, examining the paper through her reading glasses. "We are not even part of their HOA." I agreed, crumpling the notice and tossing it into the recycling bin. Probably just sent to the wrong address. I would not worry about it. But 3 days later, another notice appeared, this one claiming we had ignored the first warning and increasing the fine to $300. Again, we dismissed it as a clerical error, though this time I sent a polite email to the contact address listed, explaining that our property was not within Sunshine Meadows boundaries and attaching a copy of our property documents as proof. We received no response, but the notices stopped coming. For a few weeks, we thought the matter was resolved. Sarah continued her work with the K-9 unit, and I focused on a major software project that had been consuming my attention. Our peaceful life seemed to have returned to normal. One morning, as Sarah was preparing to leave for a training session, we heard a sharp knock at our front door. Opening it, I found myself face to face with 3 people I had never seen before, 2 women and 1 man, all dressed in what I can only describe as suburban formal attire. "Good morning," said the woman at the front, her voice carrying an artificial sweetness that immediately put me on edge. "I am Karen Whitfield, president of the Sunshine Meadows HOA. These are my colleagues, Robert Thompson, our treasurer, and Patricia Simmons, our secretary." I nodded politely, though already feeling a sense of unease. "How can I help you?" Karen's smile remained fixed as she replied, "We have noticed that you have been ignoring our compliance notices. As new residents to our community, we understand there might be some confusion about the rules, but prompt compliance is expected from all homeowners." I took a deep breath before responding. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Our property is not actually within Sunshine Meadows. We are part of the unincorporated county land that borders your development. Karen's smile faltered slightly. "That is incorrect. All properties in this area fall under our jurisdiction. Your continued refusal to acknowledge this is concerning." At this point, Sarah had come to the door, curious about the conversation. She stood beside me, leaning slightly on her cane, with Max sitting obediently at her side. I could feel her tension as she assessed the situation with her trained police officer's instincts. "I assure you, we checked thoroughly before purchasing this home," I explained, trying to keep my voice level. "Our property deed and the county records clearly show we are outside your HOA boundaries." Robert, the treasurer, spoke up. "Your noncompliance affects property values for everyone. That police vehicle in your driveway is classified as a commercial vehicle, which violates our covenants, and those modifications to your entrance are unapproved alterations." Sarah stepped forward, her posture straightening despite her discomfort. "Those modifications are ADA-compliant accommodations for my disability, and that vehicle is a police unit assigned to me as an active-duty K-9 officer." Patricia scoffed, not even attempting to hide her disdain. "We have heard all kinds of excuses. Rules are rules, and exceptions lead to neighborhood decline." Karen reached into her folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Here is a membership application and a copy of our covenants. Once you have signed and submitted these with your back dues and accumulated fines, we can discuss a timeline for bringing your property into compliance." I took the papers more out of shock than agreement. "I will review these, but I am certain there has been a mistake. Our property is not part of your HOA." "We will expect your response by the end of the week," Karen stated firmly. "Further delays will result in additional penalties." With that, the three turned and walked back down our driveway to Karen's white SUV parked at the curb. Sarah closed the door and looked at me, her expression a mix of concern and irritation. "What was that all about?" I explained the situation as we reviewed the documents Karen had left. The membership application included an annual fee of $750 plus the alleged violations, that now totaled $450. The covenants were extensive and restrictive, including limitations that would have made our necessary modifications for Sarah's disability nearly impossible to approve. "This is ridiculous," Sarah said, placing the papers on our kitchen counter. "We need to talk to our neighbors about this. I doubt we are the only ones being harassed." That weekend, we spoke with several nearby homeowners and discovered that the new HOA board had been attempting to expand their boundaries, claiming properties that had never been part of Sunshine Meadows. Two other families on our street had received similar notices, but had ignored them. An elderly couple down the block had actually paid the fines out of fear and confusion. Taking all this information, I drafted a formal letter to the HOA board, attaching copies of our property documents, county maps showing boundary lines, and citations of relevant state laws regarding HOA jurisdiction. I sent it via certified mail to ensure it could not be ignored. The response was not what we expected. Rather than backing down, the harassment intensified. Passive-aggressive notes appeared on our door almost daily. Cars with Sunshine Meadows parking stickers would drive slowly past our house, occupants openly taking photos. Someone called the county to report us for code violations, resulting in an inspector visiting our home, though he quickly determined all our modifications were properly permitted and ADA compliant. Sarah tried to maintain her usual composure, but I could see the stress affecting her. Her mobility issues tended to worsen under stress, and the constant feeling of being watched was taking a toll. Still, we held our ground, documenting every instance of harassment and consulting with neighbors about forming a united front against the HOA's overreach. The situation reached its breaking point on a Wednesday afternoon. Sarah had gone to physical therapy, a twice-weekly appointment that helped manage her chronic pain. When she returned home, her face was ashen, and Max was uncharacteristically agitated in the back seat of our personal vehicle. "They took it," she said as I came out to help her from the car. "Took what?" I asked, confused by her distress. "My police vehicle. It was gone when I finished my session. The parking lot attendant said a tow truck came for it." She handed me a slip of paper. "They left this on my windshield." The note read, "Vehicle in violation of HOA Covenant Article 7.3. No commercial vehicles permitted in residential areas. Contact Sunshine Meadows HOA for retrieval information." I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I had experienced before. This was not just harassment anymore. This was theft. Sarah's specially equipped vehicle was department property, modified at considerable expense to accommodate her disability while allowing her to transport Max safely. Without it, she could not perform her duties. "I need to call the station," Sarah said, her voice steadier than I expected. Despite her visible distress, her training was kicking in. She was thinking like an officer now, not just a harassed homeowner. While Sarah made her calls, I contacted the towing company listed on the back of the note. The dispatcher informed me that the vehicle had indeed been impounded at the request of the Sunshine Meadows HOA, who had provided documentation claiming authority over our property. The cost to retrieve it would be $275 for the tow, plus $50 per day for storage. When I explained that the vehicle was police property and the HOA had no jurisdiction over our home, the dispatcher simply replied, "Take it up with them, sir. We just do what we are told when the paperwork looks legitimate." My next call was to the HOA office. Karen answered personally, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Oh yes, Mr. Mitchell. We did try to warn you about the commercial vehicle violation. If you are ready to comply with HOA regulations now, we might be able to help expedite the return of your wife's vehicle." "You have no right," I began, but she cut me off. "We have every right to enforce our covenants. If you would like to discuss this further, I suggest you come to our office with your membership application and payment. Otherwise, I believe the impound fees increase daily." I was about to respond when Sarah gently took the phone from my hand. Her expression had changed. The distress was gone, replaced by a calm determination I recognized from her years in law enforcement. "Mrs. Whitfield, this is Officer Sarah Mitchell. I want you to understand something clearly. You have authorized the towing of a police vehicle. That is department property, and your actions have interfered with police operations. I have already spoken with my captain and the department legal team. I strongly suggest you facilitate the immediate return of that vehicle before this escalates beyond a civil matter." There was a moment of silence before Karen responded, her voice slightly less confident. "The rules apply to everyone, Officer Mitchell. Perhaps your department should not have assigned you a vehicle that violates clear residential covenants." Sarah remained calm. "I will be handling this professionally, Mrs. Whitfield. You should prepare to do the same." She ended the call and turned to me. "Do not worry, this will be handled, but not with anger. That is exactly what they want, for us to lose control so they can paint us as the unreasonable ones." I marveled at my wife's composure. Even with her disability, even after being stranded at her therapy appointment, even facing this blatant discrimination, she remained professional. This was why I had fallen in love with her years ago. Her unwavering sense of justice and her ability to maintain clarity under pressure. "What is the plan?" I asked, trusting her judgment completely. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen since this ordeal began. "I am a police officer even with these limitations, and they just messed with the wrong K-9 handler. Give me some time to make a few more calls." Sarah did not waste time feeling sorry for herself. Instead, she activated her professional network with precision and purpose. As a respected K-9 officer with over 15 years of service before her injury, she had connections throughout local law enforcement and the justice system. Within hours of her vehicle being towed, an informal task force had begun to form. My contribution was methodical documentation. I created a detailed timeline of all interactions with the HOA, complete with dates, times, and participants. We contacted neighbors who had witnessed the tow truck taking Sarah's vehicle from our property, gathering statements that confirmed the vehicle had never been parked in violation of any legitimate regulation. 5 neighbors provided written statements about the ongoing harassment we had experienced. One neighbor, a retired legal secretary, shared particularly valuable information. She had been researching the HOA's activities after receiving similar harassment and discovered that Sunshine Meadows had been systematically targeting properties along the border of their actual jurisdiction. They had been sending violation notices, collecting fines, and in some cases, even placing liens on homes that were legally outside their authority. Perhaps most disturbing was what we learned about Corinne's husband, Michael Whitfield. He worked as an executive at the property management company that had been contracted by the Sunshine Meadows HOA shortly after Corinne became president. This company received a percentage of all fines collected and fees for processing violations, a clear conflict of interest that explained the aggressive expansion of HOA enforcement. Meanwhile, Sarah's police department had launched its own investigation. The unauthorized towing of a police vehicle was taken extremely seriously, especially one specially equipped for a disabled officer. The department's legal team obtained the paperwork that had been submitted to the towing company, discovering forged signatures and fraudulent claims of property ownership. The prosecutor's office became involved when the investigation revealed that the HOA's actions potentially constituted fraud, falsification of documents, and most seriously, discrimination against a disabled officer. Sarah's captain, a burly man named James Rodriguez, who had been her mentor since the academy, personally visited our home to assure us that the department stood behind us completely. "We protect our own," he told Sarah, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "And what they did to you was not just harassment, it was an attack on the department itself." Our dining room table became command central for building a case. Sarah, despite the additional pain caused by stress and disrupted routine, worked tirelessly to coordinate between various officials. Max remained by her side constantly, seeming to sense her determination and occasionally nudging her hand when she needed to take a break. The forensic analysis of the towing authorization revealed something particularly damning. The document contained a forged signature purporting to be from the county property manager, authorizing enforcement actions on our property. This forgery elevated the case from a civil dispute to potential criminal charges. 4 days into our investigation, we received an unexpected call from Patricia Simmons, the HOA secretary. Her voice trembled as she spoke to me on the phone. "I never wanted any part of this," she confessed. "Corinne assured us that expanding enforcement was legal because of some annexation agreement from years ago. I just took notes at the meetings. I did not know they were forging documents." Patricia agreed to provide a sworn statement about the HOA board's activities, including meetings where Corinne had explicitly targeted our home because Sarah's police vehicle was an eyesore, and our disability modifications lowered property values. Patricia's testimony would prove crucial in establishing intent. By the end of the week, Sarah felt we had gathered sufficient evidence to confront the HOA board directly. Rather than rushing in with accusations, she organized a formal meeting at the HOA office. When we arrived, Corinne's confident smile faltered visibly at the sight of our entourage. Accompanying us were Sarah's K-9 partner, Max, looking regal and alert in his official police vest. Captain Rodriguez, our attorney Thomas Bennett, who specialized in HOA disputes and disability discrimination, and representatives from the district attorney's office who had taken an interest in the potential criminal aspects of the case. Corinne attempted to control the meeting from the start. "We only agreed to meet with the Mitchell family, not this entire delegation." Sarah remained calm, settling into a chair with Max beside her. "These individuals are all relevant to the matters we need to discuss. I suggest we proceed." Our attorney placed a digital recorder on the table. "This meeting will be recorded with the consent of all parties. If anyone objects, they may leave now." No one moved. Robert Thompson, the treasurer, looked particularly uncomfortable, while Patricia kept her eyes downcast. Karen maintained her facade of authority, though I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled papers. Captain Rodriguez spoke first. "Mrs. Whitfield, this meeting concerns the illegal towing of a police department vehicle from property outside your HOA jurisdiction, using fraudulent documentation. Before we proceed further, we want to give you the opportunity to explain these actions." Karen straightened her posture. "Our covenants clearly prohibit commercial vehicles, including municipal vehicles not used primarily as personal transportation. We have documentation showing that the Mitchell property falls within our boundaries according to the original development plans." Our attorney smiled thinly. "We have the original development plans here, along with county records dating back 30 years. They clearly show the Mitchell property has never been part of Sunshine Meadows. We also have statements from the original developers confirming this fact." He then proceeded to lay out document after document, methodically dismantling the HOA's claims of authority over our property. As each piece of evidence was presented, Robert and Patricia grew visibly more distressed. Karen attempted to maintain her composure, but her arguments became increasingly fragmented. When confronted with the forged towing authorization, Karen attempted to deflect. "All paperwork is processed through our management company. I simply signed off on recommendations from our compliance officer." Robert finally broke. "That is not true. You specifically directed the action against the Mitchells. You said we needed to make an example of them because others were watching to see if we would enforce the rules against a police officer." Patricia nodded in agreement. "Karen told us her husband's company would handle all the paperwork. We never saw the actual towing authorization." The representative from the district attorney's office leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you aware that falsifying such documents constitutes fraud, and that targeting Officer Mitchell's vehicle, which was modified for her disability, potentially violates the Americans with Disabilities Act?" Karen's facade finally crumbled. "I was acting in the best interests of our community. Property values decrease when rules are not enforced consistently. The Mitchells have been defiant from the beginning." Captain Rodriguez stood up, his imposing figure drawing all eyes. "The Mitchells have been victims of a persistent campaign of harassment, culminating in the theft of department property. Consider this formal notice that both criminal and civil investigations are proceeding. We will require full cooperation from everyone involved." The meeting concluded with formal notifications being served to each board member. As we left the building, I noticed Sarah suppressing a smile. Max trotted proudly beside her, sensing his handler's victory. The tide had turned, and justice was finally in motion. The following days brought a cascade of consequences for Karen and her collaborators. The towing company, fearing accessory charges, returned Sarah's vehicle without fees and issued a public apology. An inspection revealed that the vehicle had suffered no damage during its impoundment, much to Sarah's relief. Karen's husband faced his own reckoning when the property management company conducted an internal audit following inquiries from the district attorney's office. The audit revealed a pattern of kickbacks related to HOA enforcement actions. Violations would be aggressively pursued, resulting in higher fees for the management company, and through various accounting maneuvers, additional compensation for Michael Whitfield. He was terminated immediately, and the company severed its contract with Sunshine Meadows. The district attorney filed charges against Karen for fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation. While awaiting her arraignment, she was forced to resign from the HOA board. Robert received lesser charges in exchange for his cooperation with investigators, while Patricia was granted immunity for her willingness to testify. Meanwhile, the legitimate homeowners within Sunshine Meadows' actual jurisdiction, now aware of the board's misconduct, organized an emergency vote that removed the remaining board members from power. A temporary committee was formed to manage essential operations until a proper election could be held. Throughout our community, reactions to these developments were overwhelmingly supportive. Neighbors who had previously been too intimidated to speak out now came forward with their own stories of harassment. We received cards, meals, and offers of assistance from people we had barely known before this ordeal. Perhaps the most moving response came during a town hall meeting called to address the HOA situation. The mayor, who had been following the case closely, publicly commended Sarah and me for exposing corruption that extended beyond just our neighborhood. Several residents stood to applaud when Sarah entered the room, Max at her side as always. That evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset over the trees behind our property, I reflected on how Sarah had handled the entire situation with remarkable grace. Despite the additional physical pain her disability had caused her during this stressful time, she had never once complained. Instead, she had channeled her law enforcement training and experience into methodical, effective action. "You know," I said, taking her hand in mine, "I have always known you were extraordinary, but watching you handle this situation, it reminds me all over again why I fell in love with you." Sarah smiled, the setting sun highlighting the silver strands in her hair. "We did this together. Your documentation and research were just as important as my contacts." "Still," I insisted, "your strength through all of this. Most people would have been broken by what they did to you." She gazed down at Max, who lay contentedly at her feet. "When I was injured, the doctors told me I would never return to active duty. Every step since then has been about proving that my disability does not define my capabilities. This was just one more challenge to overcome." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride in my wife and profound gratitude for our partnership. The HOA had targeted us believing we would be easy to intimidate, a disabled officer and her work-from-home husband. They could not have been more wrong about who they were dealing with. The aftermath of the HOA confrontation brought positive changes that transformed our neighborhood in ways we never could have anticipated. The reconstituted Sunshine Meadows HOA, now run by reasonable community members who understood the proper limits of their authority, established clear boundaries and transparent practices that respected all homeowners. In a gesture that seemed both practical and symbolic, the new board's first official act was to formally acknowledge that our property and several others were outside their jurisdiction. They issued a public apology to all affected homeowners and created new maps clearly delineating the actual HOA boundaries. The previous vague language about community standards was replaced with specific, reasonable guidelines that were applied consistently and fairly. The prosecutor's office, impressed by the evidence we had gathered, used our case as a springboard to launch a broader investigation into predatory HOA practices across the county. Sarah was invited to serve as a consultant, sharing her experience and helping develop protocols for identifying signs of overreach and abuse of power. Our home, once targeted for non-compliance, became something of a gathering place for neighbors seeking advice about their rights as homeowners. Sarah and I found ourselves becoming reluctant advocates, creating an informal support network for others facing similar situations. We compiled resources, contact information for responsible officials, and template letters that homeowners could use when dealing with unreasonable demands. The experience also strengthened our marriage in unexpected ways. The shared challenge of standing up against injustice reminded us of how effectively we could work as a team, each contributing different strengths to overcome obstacles. Sarah's law enforcement perspective complemented my analytical approach to problems, creating a balanced response that proved more effective than either of us could have managed alone. 6 months after the confrontation, we hosted a neighborhood cookout in our backyard. The gathering included both longtime friends and newer acquaintances we had met through our advocacy work. Even some of the Sunshine Meadows residents attended, including former adversaries who had come to recognize the harm caused by the previous board's actions. As I grilled burgers and hot dogs, I watched Sarah moving through the crowd, Max faithfully at her side. Despite using her cane more heavily on that day, the weather changes always affected her mobility. She radiated a quiet confidence that drew people to her. Children asked permission to pet Max, who had become something of a neighborhood celebrity, while adults sought Sarah's advice on various matters. "Your wife is remarkable," commented our next-door neighbor, a retired teacher who had provided one of the witness statements during our investigation. Most people would have been bitter after what happened, but she seems to have channeled it into something positive. I nodded in agreement. That has always been her way. Even after her injury, when others might have given up, she found a new path forward. As the afternoon progressed into evening, our guests gradually departed until only a few close friends remained. We sat around the fire pit in our backyard, sharing stories and occasionally falling into comfortable silence. Max dozed at Sarah's feet, occasionally lifting his head when a particularly interesting scent wafted his way. I never wanted to be an activist, Sarah admitted, gazing into the flames. I just wanted to do my job and live in peace. But sometimes life puts you in positions where standing up is not just about you, it is about everyone who might face the same injustice. 1 year after the towing incident, life had returned to a new normal. Karen had pleaded guilty to multiple charges, receiving a sentence of community service and 3 years probation. More importantly, county regulations governing HOAs had been overhauled, with new transparency requirements and oversight mechanisms designed to prevent similar abuses. Sarah had received recognition from the police department for her role in exposing systemic problems that affected public servants. Despite her disability, or perhaps because of the resilience it had taught her, she had advanced within the department, taking on additional responsibilities in training and community relations. Our story had inspired others to stand up against similar injustices. I occasionally found myself consulting on cases where homeowners faced overreach from property associations or local government entities. What had begun as a personal battle had evolved into a calling that gave new purpose to both our lives. One crisp autumn morning, I accompanied Sarah to the police training facility where she was conducting a session for new handlers. Max, now approaching retirement age but still sharp and enthusiastic, demonstrated techniques alongside younger dogs in the program. I watched with pride as Sarah, despite her visible limp, commanded the respect of officers with far more mobility. The key to effective K-9 handling is not physical perfection, she told the trainees. It is about communication, trust, and mutual respect. Your partner needs to know that you will protect them as fiercely as they protect you. As I observed the session, I reflected on how apt those words were for all relationships, including ours. Throughout the HOA ordeal, we had protected each other. My support during her moments of physical pain, her strength during my moments of doubt and anger. That evening, as we prepared dinner together in our kitchen, Sarah paused to look out the window at our peaceful neighborhood. The sun was setting over the trees behind our property, casting long shadows across the lawn where Max patrolled his territory one last time before coming inside for the night. You know, she said thoughtfully, sometimes I think about what would have happened if we had just given in at the beginning, paid their fines, joined their HOA, removed my ramp. I placed my hand on her shoulder. We would have lost something important, not just our independence but our self-respect. She nodded, and we would not have been the last ones they targeted. Some battles need to be fought, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. As Max trotted up the ramp that had once been declared a violation, I reflected on the unexpected journey we had taken. What began as a simple defense of our property rights had evolved into a movement that improved life for countless homeowners across the county. Sometimes justice requires bringing both legal knowledge and, in our unique case, a trained police dog to situations where power has been abused. Standing up for what is right, even when difficult, creates stronger communities and inspires others to do the same. Our experience had taught us that disabilities and differences are not weaknesses, but sources of unique perspective and strength. And sometimes, the people who seem easiest to victimize turn out to be the very ones who can bring about the most profound change.